This is the first in a sermon series entitled, What's the Difference? And by a sermon series, I mean I'll just call a sermon every now and then, What's the Difference? And talk about the differences between things. It's not going to be every Sunday or anything. Today, I'm talking about what's the difference between Sunni Islam and Shia Islam. Now, I am not a scholar in this area, so I am going to be giving you the benefit of my 10 days of research or so, and I may paint things with too broad a brush. I will try not to. But if you want to get mad at me about this one, just wait until I do Catholics and Protestants. So we begin with Muhammad, who was born in a town called Mecca in what is now Saudi Arabia, but it wasn't then, in the year 570. His father died 6 months before he was born, and his mother died when he was 6. So he went to live with his grandfather, who then died after 2 years. He went to live with his uncle, who was a wealthy merchant in the town of Mecca. So Muhammad was raised in a privileged family, taught to be a merchant. He married a widow who was about 40 years old, and they had some children. He only had one that lived to adulthood, his daughter Fatima, but they had more than one child. When every year he would go on retreat up to a cave in the wilderness, and when he was 40, the angel Gabriel came to him and started talking to him. So he would come back to Mecca and he would tell his friends what Gabriel said, because he memorized what Gabriel told him, and the friends wrote that down, which then became the Quran. He, after 3 years, started preaching more in public than just telling his friends. And what he said was, the main message that Gabriel had given him was that there was only one God, one true God. Now, this would not have caused so much of a problem, except the other part of the message was, all the other gods of all the people were false gods, and they were idols, and they should be destroyed. So the people of that time had a religion which you could call animism, or you could call polytheism, where this tree, this river, this rock has a spirit, and the spirit has a name, and you worship the spirit of a place, or the spirit of a thing, or anyway. They didn't want their figures that they focused worship on to be destroyed, and Muhammad's followers wanted them destroyed. So there started to be some killing. People killed the followers of Muhammad. Now, they didn't kill Muhammad because he had that privilege of being from a wealthy family. But his followers began dying, and there began to be skirmishes and lots of tension. So eventually, Muhammad took his family, and they fled to Medina, a nearby town called Medina, where they set up their household, and the followers followed them. And the people from Mecca there were skirmishes. The religion was spreading. An army of people from Mecca came and just defeated the Muslims in Medina. But 5 years after that, Muhammad returned with an army of 10,000 people and captured captured Mecca for good. And so the religion was spreading like wildfire. And by the time that Muhammad died in the year 632, Islam had spread throughout the whole Arabian Peninsula. Now, Muhammad's death created this problem. He had either not named a successor or had not told enough people what the name of his successor was. And so the followers were left not knowing. The majority group, a bigger group of his followers, felt that the new leader should be elected by the elite of the religion. You know, in Roman Catholicism, when there needs to be a new pope, the elite, the cardinals, get together and they vote until there's a new pope. So this is kind of how the majority group wanted to do it. And they felt that a good leader would be a man named Abu Bakr, who was the father of one of Muhammad's wives. The minority group, though, felt that instead of the new leader being elected, that God should choose the new leader. And the way that God would choose the new leader is that the leader would be in the family of Muhammad. And they wanted a guy named Ali, who was a cousin of Muhammad's and was also married to Muhammad's daughter Fatima. So the smaller group wanted Ali. The larger group wanted Abu Bakr. Okay. What usually happens? The larger group won. And so Ali and his group did what the minority often do, which is just kind of sit on the sidelines and simmer. Abu became caliph. They called him the caliph. And when Abu got sick and died, he had learned from Muhammad's mistake. He had learned to name a successor. In fact, he named two. He named the successor, and he named the guy who was going to be the successor after that guy. So he named Caliph number 2 and Caliph number 3. Caliph number 2 ruled and conquered even more territory, kind of in a military way, making more converts, kind of in a military way, and conquered parts of Persia, which is where Iran and Iraq are now. And then he got assassinated by some of the Persians that he had conquered. The number 2 successor then came into power, took over as the 3rd caliph, and ruled for 12 years before he also was assassinated. So the first 3 caliphs were the result of this vote on Abu Bakr by the elite of the larger group. So the smaller group, it's been 25 years or so now, have been simmering. And then the large group, everybody feels like probably Ali should be given the caliphate now. So finally, the small group and the large group want the same guy, Ali, husband of Fatima. And so he comes into power as the caliph, only the smaller group calls him the imam. He ruled, and everybody was happy, for 5 years. When he died, he named his son, Hassan, as his successor. The large group liked to elect. They didn't want the family. They had a rebel force that came over and forced Hassan out of power. Hassan died, and the large group followed the rebel guy. The smaller group followed the son of Hassan, whose name was Hussein. So it went Ali, Hassan, Hussein. Those were the first 3 imams that were chosen the proper way for the smaller group. You with me so far? Excellent. Since the smaller group had wanted Ali as their leader from the beginning, they counted these 3 as the proper, true leaders, and they felt like the first 3 caliphs had just been a delay. Well, eventually, the 7th caliph of the larger group beheaded Hussein, and the minority group started following the son of Hussein, and they've never got back together. The beheadings are the problem for everybody. And one of the children wisely said at the children's story, "It's just not that big a deal. Red hat, blue hat, it's not that big a deal." And so there are some, what I want to say is, the large group were the Sunnis, and the smaller group were the Shia. Shiites is a way of anglicizing that word. The Shia and the Sunni, you could say it either way. So within the Sunni and within the Shia group, there are wide varieties of subgroups, from fundamentalist on up through mystics, on up through secular folks. And they are all over the world. Both are all over the world. So they live side by side. Some villages are Sunni villages, some are Shia villages. There are countries who are mainly run, the power structure is one or the other. Saudi Arabia, the power structure is Sunni, but a very fundamentalist sect of Sunni called Wahhabi. That's Saudi Arabia. Iran is run with a Shia power structure. And so the Sunni in Iran feel oppressed. And it's not just a feeling. I mean, there's actual oppression that goes on all over the place. When the other group is in power, the second groups get oppressed. Iraq was run by the Ba'ath Party. Saddam Hussein was Ba'ath. That's a part of Sunni. But there are Sunnis and Shiites in Iraq too. And I am not sure how anyone in our government at the time thought it would be no big deal to topple the tight lid guy that was keeping the lid on all the conflict, however terribly he did it. When we took the lid off, it was going to blow. And many people knew that. They just didn't tell us. Is this a big deal or not? You go, oh, you follow Abu, you follow Ali, it's no big deal. It's a big deal because of this. I'm telling you why. When you have a religion, most people want to know who holds the authority in a religion. You want to know who's going to tell you the real thing, because human beings have a lust for certainty. And that's liberals too. We have a lust for certainty. Think about the last discussion you had about dishwashing versus paper plates. Curly light bulbs versus not curly light. You know, we can get as fraggled about that. So anyway, it's a big deal because who holds the authority? Is the authority held by someone who is elected? Can that be the way? Or is the authority held by someone who is descended, that God put into this family to have the authority, like a dynasty of kings? Authority tells you how to live, how to eat, how to sleep, how to marry, how to raise children, how to die, how to govern a country. These are important questions to human beings. We want to know the answer, and there are those of us who have a lust for certainty that we want to know the answer. I'm going to bring it to us just for a second. The Sunnis and Shia live in a very polarized world. But we are living in a world that's getting more and more polarized, in the United States. In 1980, about 5% of Republicans, 5% of Democrats would be upset if their kid married someone from the other party. Now, 33% of Democrats would be upset if their kid married a Republican. 49% of Republicans would be upset if their kid married a Democrat. Or Democrat, as it's starting to say. So we're getting a little more polarized, and we've only been going for 200 years, and the Republicans and Democrats have only been who they are for way less than that. So imagine if we were going for 1,400 years this way. There would be Democratic names and Republican names. There would be Democratic towns and Republican towns. There kind of already are. You would start to imagine that you could tell by looking who was who. So we are polarized as well, and especially since 1987 when Reagan deregulated the Federal Communications Commission and the fairness doctrine went out the window, and so now we have red stations and blue stations, and people only listen to the station of their tribe, and so we've got red facts and blue facts, and now when we argue with one another, we have heard the same facts presented in very different ways, or we've heard different facts, or we've heard facts, and we talk to each other not having much common ground and imagining, how could you believe that way? What in the possible realm of reality can you still think that he's a Muslim? I don't know how, and so we're getting a little bit more polarized, but we're not to the point of beheading each other yet. And the preachers are working hard to keep us all from getting to that point. And other people are working hard too, not just the preachers. And I'm reminded at this point of an essay, a very famous essay by a philosopher, Isaiah Berlin, that you probably studied in college, called The Hedgehog and the Fox. And it's talking about how there are two different kinds of people in the world, that the hedgehog brain knows one thing deeply. And the fox brain knows many things and uses them all. Here's an example of a hedgehog brain. Love is the most important thing. Every decision I make, every lens I use is going to have to do with love. What's the more loving thing? Not bad. Another hedgehog thing is power is what it's all about. I'm gonna imagine that everybody is after power, and you notice who's got more power, who's got less power. Sex is what it's all about, Freud said, and his hedgehog lens was that everything was about sex. So you have some examples. The class struggle is what it's all about. Mother Jones felt the class struggle was what it was all about, and she disapproved of anyone working for women's suffrage because it distracted from the class struggle. So one idea at a time is the hedgehog brain. It's not better, it's not worse. There's good and bad about both kinds of brains, but and there are both kinds of people within Islam and within Christianity, etc., both kinds of people. The hedgehog people tend toward what Sophia Faz described as walled garden beliefs, rigid beliefs. Anybody who doesn't believe the way I do is misguided or dangerous or stupid or crazy, and then either must be shunned from the community or must be treated with distance as if we were a social worker and they were someone in need of some kind of, why don't you get help? You need to get help. Or the fox people within all these religions treat other people as well. You know, that's one way of thinking about it. And you have your truth and I have my truth. And then the hedgehog person says, no, somebody's truth is closer to the truth. And I think it's mine. And within the Muslim religion, it's the hedgehog mind people that we're seeing right now. And it's the hedgehog mind Christians that we mostly see on Facebook that have one idea, and if you're not with us, you're against us, and you probably need to be removed. Because my sense of purity is outraged by having your impurity here in my world. As I say, liberals do this too. We love purity. We're like, well, I don't buy this because they're owned by that person. I don't buy this because they're owned by that person. My sweet friends, everybody is owned by terrible people almost, and it's impossible to stay pure. Remember when we were eating all that fish because it was so good for us, omega-3s, then we found out about mercury. Man, now there's no way to stay pure except to just like eat ice cubes that have been filtered. So within the liberals, we got hedgehogs and we've got foxes, and I don't know which one I am. I don't know. But I do like the person who said there are two different kinds of people: those who divide the world into two kinds of people and those who don't. But, so there are Sunni, hedgehog-mind people with guns and money in ISIS. Because they're Sunni, they're supported by Saudi Arabia. Because they're Sunni, they are fought by Shia Iran. Because we are, the kindest way to put it is naive. We are now fighting in Syria with Iran, our enemy, against our ally Saudi Arabia, but they've got all the oil and they're our friends, our buddies, so we just don't say anything when they behead people. We're mad at the other people who behead people, but not our oil-rich buddies who are beheading people. So see how, let's see what's the kind word for this. See how awkward that is? And when ISIS grabs a bus full of people, they're trying to find out who's Shia and who's Sunni, because they're going to kill the Shiites and they're going to let the Sunnis go. And the way you tell is you look at their names on their ID. Sometimes you can tell by the name. Mohammed, that doesn't help you, because both sides are going to be naming their kids that. But if your name is Hassan or Hussein, you might be Shia. They have different, and if your name is Abu Bakr, you probably are Sunni. They have different villages, so you look, see where somebody's from. Are you from the Sunni village? Are you from the Shia village? Sometimes they say, how do you pray? Well, everybody knows they're trying to separate the Sunnis from the Shias. So people try to study how the Sunnis pray so you can answer correctly, because the Sunnis pray with their hands crossed over their bodies, but the Shia sometimes extend their arms so they touch their thighs as they pray, and so that's a way to tell people apart. Not, again, that touching your thighs rather than crossing your arms is any big deal. It's not. Where the authority lies for the questions of how to live, how to die, how to raise your children, how to spend your money, how to govern your country, that's important, because you want to be right. And if there's a person out there who's not right, you've got to correct the situation. I have a friend who posted the other day on Facebook, I should be working right now, but there are so many people who are wrong on the internet who must be corrected. So what's the difference? The difference is, where does your authority come from? How can you be right? And how can you coexist with people who are wrong? For us, Unitarian Universalists, where does authority lie? It lies in the person who is in community. In the person in community. Because we go, yeah, that sounds right to me. And to us, that's enough reason to believe it. It sounds right to you? Good. Believe it. Within your community. Because my friend's Aunt Maybell felt the ring of truth tell her that she was supposed to marry Jesus when he came back. So she killed her husband so she'd be ready. Now, anyone in her community would have said, Maybell, that is not the truth. But she was isolated in her own reality, and so she didn't have that community piece of the authority. That we have authority within the individual, within community. So we can kind of keep each other between the lines. For most stripes of Christians, the authority is in the Bible. So you look to the Bible for your authority. For Roman Catholics, Greek Orthodox, Anglicans, and Episcopalians, the authority is in the Bible and in church tradition, even Stephen. So, what do? We tolerate impurity whether it's about light bulbs or dishwashing versus paper plates or clapping versus not clapping in worship, we tolerate impurities. Even the people who are dangerous and wrong who are sitting right next to us. We remember this thing that your minister tells you all the time, that when you feel that flush of self-righteousness, it means you're about to behave badly. And I want you to start at least 1 out of every 8 sentences with the words, "I could be wrong." Amen, little friend.